So, for those of you who may or may not know, I am currently writing a book about my experience of being diagnosed with autism later in life. And this was a paragraph that I wrote about friendships. At the end of the day, I am inherently a lone wolf. I will always find comfort in my own company, and the developing relationship that I have with myself is my biggest priority. I came into this world alone and will exit this world alone. I know that friends have a place in my life and that I do need them. Everyone needs a buddy to share their innermost thoughts with. Humans are social creatures after all. I am, however, still coming to understand where they fit in my life. Right now, I've settled in the knowing that to be able to share a laugh with somebody is a simple way of connection, and if for nothing else, a bit of light-hearted fun in a world of so many uncertainties. The reason I share the details of my friendships, even those that don't necessarily reflect the best version of me, is to keep my story honest. Life can be confusing enough, but at an autism diagnosis, or the lack of one, and it's not just the world and relationships that feel unclear, but your sense of self. That's what I've tried to convey, the constant questioning and deep thinking that bubbles beneath the surface in each of my friendships. If you relate to this, it's not that you're cold, resistant to connection, or better off alone. It's that your brain is fully wired to fully understand the who, what, where, when, why, and how of every situation before you can process it. Why relationships feel so hard with autism. This has been a topic that has, I guess, been introduced to me again. This lesson has been introduced to me again in my life experiences. The messages that I share are ones that I live day to day. It's how I can talk as authentically as I do. There's been this confusing but really great shift that has started to happen, and I'm sure that it is something that you guys will be able to relate on. If you are autistic or neurodivergent in any way, any capacity, I am sure that you have had this experience or this feeling that those that wanted to befriend you, you almost had to kind of take them on as a friend, regardless of your interests, regardless of the commonalities you two shared, because there was always this feeling that there was never going to be another person to come along, and that friends and connections were going to be so far and few between. I certainly have always felt that my true self, my unmasked self, would be very offensive or very off-putting to people. And it's not that I am a horrible person or offensive, but that's just kind of, in my early years, what my behavior told me was it was a lot. It was too much of something or too little of something else. As I come back to the first point I made, this shift has started to happen very recently, where I no longer feel this immediate need to befriend the one that wants to befriend me, or pretend like there is a connection between this person and I, whoever. I'm not talking about anyone specific, but I no longer feel the need to pretend is the bottom line. It's what I'm trying to say. And that has come through this little quiet belief that has kind of always been there in my life. I've always had this belief or this knowing of who I am and what I have to give the world, but I just didn't believe that it was loud enough or strong enough that it would result in anything. And it has started to result in something, and I'm now getting picky. I had this conversation with my therapist the other day, and an emotion that I'm starting to feel that, funnily enough, I immediately put as a fault or a blame to myself, when really it wasn't at all, and it was so far from what I preached to you guys, and that was, I have been starting to feel this incessant feeling amongst the people that I have been surrounding myself with, or, hanging out with, or getting to know in some capacity, I've been feeling a loneliness in their company. I have been trying to fight that a little bit, believing that it was something to do with me, or that I am not seeing the value of them, or I'm not doing something, I guess is what you're taking away from what I'm saying. I kind of asked my therapist for her take on a situation that I am currently in, and this emotion of feeling lonely kind of came up, and she said to me that I have now reached a place where I actually respect myself, perhaps in a way that I never have before, which she is correct. And so it dawned on me that maybe this loneliness feeling is actually this newfound respect I've got. And it's saying, hey, you don't have to put up with the bullshit anymore. You don't actually have to put up with this person's ideas or beliefs or perspective just because you want a friend or just because you want a connection, because the fact of the matter is you can choose. And this is my mind talking to me, by the way. You know that you are a great person, and you know that you have a lot to give someone. And that goes for every single one of you right now listening. This is something new that I am learning, that I wanted to start this video by saying, listen to your emotions. It's not a failing or a fault of your own for having them. It's just telling you something. And you're allowed to be picky with who you let into your circle. Just had to say that. I'm sure that there are so many of you that can relate to this sentiment that I had mentioned in the intro of this video, and that is being an inherent lone wolf. This has definitely been a reoccurring theme of my life that has always gotten me into a little bit of strife, misunderstandings with friends, with previous partners. The fact of the matter is, I think the reason that relationships can feel so hard for autistic people is we desperately crave and without a doubt need that alone time, in order to regulate ourselves, in order to regulate our minds, in order to actually understand what the fuck we think about any given topic without the presence of mind of someone else's perspective, without someone else's input. I think people in my life have gotten offended when I have asked for that alone time, and perhaps that was a failing on my part for not explaining why I need that alone time or what alone time actually allows for me. Maybe they just saw it as offensive. I don't want to spend time with them, and I'm definitely working on my communication abilities. But all of that being said, I think people immediately take the approach of it's something wrong with them if I want the alone time, versus it's something to do with me and the way that my brain regulates itself and the way that my body regulates itself. And maybe this is a perspective that you guys can share, particularly if you're married to a neurotypical. How have you managed those dynamics? I'd be totally interested to hear. I actually really marvel at autistic people who have maintained a marriage of some capacity, because I definitely always grew up believing that marriage was never going to be something that I was going to be able to do. And as I got into relationships with men, this self-sabotage just got bigger and bigger. And I'm definitely in the process of understanding why this is, and I think it perhaps is beyond just being autistic, and maybe something to do with me not being entirely straight, which I have kind of talked about on here a little bit, and it might be something that I divulge into a little bit more in future as I come to know myself more. But all of that to say, relationships have always failed for me. Friendships have failed for me, and I'm really trying to nurture them and make more intentional choices in a way that I never have before, and actually take particular care of them in a way that I never have before. See them as something worth losing rather than something I can gain by having them gone. Why do we struggle? Why do autistic people struggle so much with relationships of any kind? Well, the first thing that I want to say is, when I was first diagnosed from the psychologist, one of the things that she communicated to me, and one of the things that was written in my report, was that relationships of any kind were going to be something that I had a very hard time with. I'll put up somewhere on the screen her exact words. It was definitely hard to read, but I also couldn't argue with what she was saying, because this was what my life had proven itself to be. This is what my relationships in any capacity, even the relationship with my own family, had proven itself to be exactly what she stated. So let's talk about it. Why do we struggle so much? I'm gonna go out on a limb for myself here right now and say that perhaps one of the biggest reasons that I have struggled in relationships in any capacity, probably more so in friendships, which might be surprising to hear with what I'm about to say, but that is rejection sensitive dysphoria. Yep, I have a very deep fear of rejection. I feel just the slightest shift in tone or communication or behavior, action, and while I can regulate myself a little bit more with rejection when it comes to my family and partners, I have a far harder time doing this in friendships. And the moment that I perceive a friend to be rejecting me, like, I'm out of there, if they yell at me, you'll never hear from me again. And I think this is it's a very common experience for neurodivergent people. I think that for a lot of us, we can go over conversations and interactions and try and dissect what everything meant. Some new term that I've learned, which I know nothing really about to honestly talk about, but I will share the term if you want to do your own research, that is relationship OCD. And I'm kind of wondering if this is something that I have always struggled with, because I pull apart every possible scenario, everything they said, how they said it, why did they mean it, why did they say that. This is never ending. And probably, particularly when I was younger, I most likely came to incorrect realizations and probably cut them off or behaved cold toward friends, toward family, toward partners, when I shouldn't have. I should have had the maturity to have a conversation, but a conversation meant vulnerability and potential rejection, and so on and so forth. So you can kind of get the picture. So that is one possible answer. It is so hot right now. I am literally dripping in sweat. An image you didn't need. Particularly in new dynamics of any kind, friendship, relationship, whatever, masking, the exhaustion of masking, can play another reason into why people can never really get in touch or never really see people or connect with people, because we feel that there is just a weight that comes to the socializing, the social aspect of an interaction. If you're not autistic, it must be such a foreign thing to understand what it means to constantly monitor your behavior, because I think people do that in certain settings, like funerals or, serious situations, work, whatever. But for autistic people, this monitoring of our behavior, of our conversation, of our tone, of everything, it's analyzed, it's monitored, it's regulated, down to even smiling. So this comes with a lot of weight. And so it can be far easier and far more exciting of staying at home, watching TV on your own, than it is to sometimes socialize or like get to know somebody. And like that's the hard truth of it. It's hard. It's very, very hard for us to socialize. We feel pressure to perform. We feel pressure to act appropriately and get it right, be acceptable. And then comes the downtime, the recovery time from this interaction. You know, and this can take days to not really invest in those relationships. You know, it sucks. It's probably worse for the individual, honestly, to not have that socialization. But at the same time, you know, it can feel really, really awful and really daunting as well. I think that's a feeling that I haven't expressed. It's daunting to put ourselves in those positions. Not only that, but like socializing, maintaining friendships, maintaining relationships of any kind, it does mean sometimes putting yourself into situations that the other person has chosen. So, you know, just the other day, I was out with somebody and I kind of like, they picked the location, but I arrived there first. And I kind of picked the spot where, you know, I could actually hear them. I could actually feel more comfortable in that environment, kind of away from the crowd. And it was said to me, it was remarked that you picked a spot like away from everyone, like everyone's over there. First hearing something like that, like it might have just been like a meaningless remark, but the way that my brain interprets these things is, oh, I've done something wrong. I've chosen the wrong table. I should have let them, you know, decide. And then comes the rejection. And it's, you know, it's really hard, particularly if you were diagnosed later in life, to communicate your own needs and stand firm in those. And even when people don't understand them or they don't respect them or they really don't acknowledge them, like this person was in my case, it's not taking it personally. And that's the part that I have not mastered yet. But that's the point that I think so many of us autistic people, so many of us neurodivergent people really need to get to, is not giving a fuck what other people say and honoring our own needs. And if the other person doesn't, like in my case, tell them bye-bye. There are going to be people that do understand, that don't require so much mental energy and will respect your sensory needs and boundaries. End of the day. Finally, I think that one other reason that a lot of us struggle with relationship issues is differences in communication. Again, I could speak for so many of us, I am sure, when I say that we have a really hard time reading facial expressions, reading behavior. If someone's not smiling, I have a really hard time detecting that they're not mad at me. So that's when I need the words. And then if I don't have the words, I'm looking at their behavior. But that's a last resort to me. We all, as human beings, have different interpretations of communication, of verbal communication, of non-verbal communication. And this is made all the more harder when you have autism. There is an anxiety that comes with socializing and getting it wrong and trying to detect the right message and what the person is saying. And that's when, you know, jokes, sarcasm is missed because you're too busy trying to like, am I getting what you're saying? I'm sure you can hear with all of what I'm saying that it's like you get to the end of this and you're like, actually, I'd just rather stay home by myself, alone with my cats. And honestly, same. Like, I get to those points and have been at those points for the majority of my life. I remember being 18 years old and not partying, and my mum's like, why aren't you going outside and enjoying your friends? And I'm like, I don't know, that just really doesn't appeal to me, and watching other people interact on the TV is far more exciting. Far more safer, for sure. At the end of the day, what I want to say in all of this is just a recognition video. If you are struggling with relationships, family relationships, friendships, co-worker, boss relationships, romantic relationships of any kind. There are so many differences to you and neurotypicals, and I really suggest just actually starting first and foremost to befriend yourself. Like, that's what I'm doing, and that's what I was talking about earlier in the video when I'm saying, like, I finally started to respect myself, because I'm actually starting to understand what I feel about things, what my opinions are, what my boundaries are, what I struggle sensory-wise. So when you start to know yourself, and then the people you're surrounding yourself with don't actually align with those things, you can actually decide to remove yourself and make room for the people that will come in. And that's the message that I want to end on, is there will always be another person. There are so many people on this earth, and there is so much diversity. Particularly now, there is the internet. There are online strangers that you can connect with and form friendships with if you're not at that point of, taking it into the real world. All I want is to say, please don't limit yourself into believing that you're unlovable, that you're, not easy to befriend or to love. Like, you are. You are so easy to love. We're friends. Hell, you're watching me. I already like you, Just please don't limit yourself to people that don't give a shit, because life it's too short. And I'm just really reminded of that in my own experiences and situations with people that I love. They are putting themselves in situations where I would love them to not be in it, but I can't do anything. I can't do anything except love them from afar. And I just don't want any of you to kind of experience that. I just want the absolute best. Anyway, I'm just rambling at this point. This was my video today, you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like it, give it a thumbs up, whatever, subscribe if you'd like, come join the party. I make a whole lot of neurodivergent content. It is always linked down below. The lighting is blowing up. Anyway, I'm finishing. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you very, very soon. Bye.